Have you ever wondered what stories the ground beneath us can tell? What secrets lie in ancient bones or even in the soil we walk on? My name is Giulia, I'm a PhD student, and all of my research is about uncovering these mysteries and bringing them back to life. But how is that even possible? Imagine this. Every single human who has ever walked the earth has left a unique signature behind, a biological fingerprint in the soil after death. And yes, one day each of us will leave the same signature behind. But don't worry, not today. This signature is embedded into something extraordinary, our DNA. DNA is not just a blueprint of who we are, it's also a map of our evolutionary journey. This is a representation of our nuclear DNA. It's a fascinating structure made of 4 building blocks, known as bases, called A, T, G, and C. And these bases always pair in the same way, A with T and G with C. While all living organisms share the same fundamental structure, the unique combination of these bases is what makes you, you. It's a biological code passed down, half from your mom and half from your dad, and carries the genetic history of countless generations, like a book waiting to be read. But during the writing of the story, tiny variation occurs. Imagine one single letter changing, like one A swapped for a G. This changing, called single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNPs, are small but powerful. They're the reason why you might have your father's eyes or your mother's hair. And for researchers, these SNPs are like genetic breadcrumbs that help solve mysteries uncovered in the ground. However, after you die, this fascinating but fragile story doesn't stay intact. DNA starts to degrade as the body breaks down. Enzymes, environmental factors, and time itself turn these long, elegant strands into fragments, a biological puzzle waiting to be pieced back together. This is where ancient DNA research comes in, allowing us to look back thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of years into the lives of our ancestors. Ancient DNA can come from surprising sources, each one with its own story to tell. Bones, for example, with their thick cortical layer, they often preserve DNA from environmental damage. Soil itself can hold the genetic fingerprint of entire ecosystems. Mummified tissue can freeze DNA in time. Even dental plaque, calcified because the dentist was not a thing back then, can preserve the microbiome, so the bacteria in your mouth. Also, fossilized poo can preserve DNA. Yeah, I know, it's a bit disgusting, but it provides an amazing snapshot into gut bacteria and ancient diet. Other sources include seeds, ice cores, and many others. So when paleogeneticists want to investigate ancient DNA, they work in clean rooms. Here I am. And the reason why it looks like I'm about to perform in a sci-fi movie, it's because we want to avoid as much as possible contamination from modern DNA, which can come from any biological source around you. It can be my own DNA, my friends and colleagues' DNA, even the DNA of the fluffy dog I had to pet on my way to the lab. So our journey in the clean room starts with sampling. We might drill a tiny bit of bone powder or collect soil from excavations. We then extract the DNA with the help of precious reagents. We tag the fragment to make them readable. And finally, we sequence them with the help of advanced machines. Amazing. However, there are some factors that we need to take into account. Ancient DNA is a long process. Just the lab work for a few samples can take up to months. It's usually a pretty expensive practice, as it involves the use of specific chemicals and precious reagents. And spoiler, as you can imagine, ancient DNA is not easy to find, especially in hot places of the planet where the chemical modification your body undergoes is accelerated. Now you're going to tell me, Giulia, why does this matter? Why dedicate years of research to such fragmented and ancient material? What is the degree of information that we can get when we find DNA? Let me give you an example. This is not what it looks like. It's a piece of birch pitch, essentially the resin that you find in trees, basically ancient chewing gums, that somebody chewed 5,700 years ago. The researchers involved in the study achieved something incredible. They reconstructed the entire human genome and the microbiome of this person. Isn't this sensational? This individual was a female, and looking carefully into her DNA, they reconstructed her ancestry. They've seen that she was more closely related to the Western hunter-gatherers from Europe than from the local hunter-gatherers she lived in central Scandinavia, rewriting the history of migration at that time in the area, right before the advent of agriculture. They also found traces of the Epstein-Barr virus in her mouth, causing, for example, mononucleosis. And they even knew what she ate before chewing the gum, hazelnut and duck meat. Based on her genetic traits, they could infer how she looked like, so her phenotype. Here is she, in an artistic reconstruction. She likely had dark skin, dark brown hair, and blue eyes, suggesting that the adaptive spread of light skin pigmentation in European populations only occurred later in prehistory. Think about that. Someone randomly chewed a piece of natural gum 5,700 years ago, and today we can bring her genetic profile back to life. This small piece of birch became a window into her past, into her life at the moment, into her surrounding environment, and even into her ancestral descendants. So now you have an idea about the striking amount of information that we can get when we find DNA. But what if I tell you that ancient DNA is not a time capsule about the past, but it can also shape our future? What if the resources encoded in our genes can practically help with problems that our species is encountering today? Let me tell you a story. Around 70,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa. And a bit later in time, they found Neanderthals in Europe, one of our closest relatives. Now, how this encounter went down is still a bit of a mystery. Was it a friendly chat by the fire or something a bit more awkward? We may never know. What we do know is this. These encounters were not just social. It was very biological. Early modern humans and Neanderthals exchanged material, genetic material, a process known as admixture. Today, around 2% of DNA of people of non-African descent come from Neanderthals. And these genes helped our ancestors to adapt to this new environment, influencing traits like immunity, skin color, and even the resistance to some diseases. Think about that. A tiny but significant part of your DNA might come from a Neanderthal ancestor who had a really memorable first date. And here comes the coolest part. This genetic exchange still affects our health today in profound ways. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. As new challenges emerged, like modern pandemics, this genetic exchange became a double-edged sword. In 2020, researchers made an incredible discovery. They found a link between Neanderthal DNA and COVID-19. They found a segment of DNA on chromosome 3 that increases the chance of having severe symptoms, such as respiratory failures and hospitalization. This segment was inherited by Neanderthals. But what does this mean? People who carry this Neanderthal-derived DNA are substantially more likely to experience severe symptoms, making it an important factor in determining who might face critical outcomes. By understanding how these archaic genetic variants affect us, we can understand which population is at higher risk to even design personalized medicine and targeted healthcare. The incredible potential of ancient DNA doesn't stop here. Let me switch to another hot topic of the 21st century. Literally hot, climate change and agriculture. As temperature rises and weather patterns become more unpredictable, our reliance on a small number of crops poses a risk to food security. One of the crops that today is more vulnerable is grapevines. The grapes that we're using today to make wine are the divas of the agricultural world. They only thrive in perfect weather. They're extremely sensitive to weather changes. However, a recent study on ancient DNA from grapes gave us a glimmer of hope. The seeds that you see depicted here are around 1,300 years old, and they've been excavated in this Byzantine town in southern Israel, an extremely dry area. Despite this harsh condition, the archaeology there suggested that the area once supported flourishing agriculture, specifically wine production. The wine produced there was so popular that it was exported all over the Byzantine Empire. So what does ancient grape have to do with modern climate change? Genetic analysis of one seed revealed a close genetic relationship with a modern variety, something that we have today. This finding inspired a bold experiment. In September 2023, this variety was planted in the desert. And just 1 year later, guess what? The vineyard is flourishing. These new old grapes might have adaptive traits that help them flourishing in hot, dry climate. Traits that we desperately need as global warming continues to reshape agriculture. Just imagine sitting in your favorite wine bar, sipping a glass of wine that's made out through 1,300 years of evolution. This is ancient DNA at work. I want to leave you today with a quote that I'm sure everybody heard at least once in their lifetime. The past is never dead. Ancient DNA is not only about looking back. It's the story of the adaptation and resources of our species. Lessons from the past that can guide us through today's challenges. So next time you're going to think about ancient DNA, don't just imagine a pile of dusty bones. Imagine the future, better medicine, sustainable agriculture, and the deeper connection to the resilience encoded in our shared history. If we remember this, the past is indeed never dead. Thank you very much.